Desert spirituality, the call of the wilderness. The desert wilderness is a fierce landscape that has served as a powerful spiritual incubator for the movers, shakers, and founders of the Abrahamic faith traditions. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Miriam, and the Israelites, and Elijah all underwent profound transformation in the desert wilderness. Even Muhammad was visited by the angel Gabriel in the desert caves. John the Baptist was the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. Of course, Jesus spent 40 days in the desert wilderness after his baptism. And even St. Paul spent significant time in the Arabian deserts after his conversion in preparation for his preaching. That's a little known fact about St. Paul. The desert has been a sacred place for prayer and fasting and facing one's demons, wrestling with one's ego. It's been a locus of desperation and revelation and transformation in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The desert called out with a new and yet ancient urgency after Emperor Constantine passed the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, when devout followers of Christ could no longer express their wild love for Jesus through martyrdom. And it was wild love indeed. Ignatius of Antioch wrote in the early 2nd century, "Please let me be thrown to the wild beasts. Through them I can reach God. I am God's wheat. I am ground by the teeth of the wild beast, that I may end as the pure bread of Christ." Like many other martyrs, Ignatius attained his goal of martyrdom, and he was devoured by lions in the Roman Colosseum, as pictured here. Believed to be a free ticket to heaven, martyrdom had made Christian rock stars out of Cyprian, Perpetua, Polycarp, Justin Martyr, Ignatius of Antioch, and also proto-martyr Stephen from the book of Acts. So with martyrdom no longer possible, Christians had to find new ways to express their passionate devotion. And an ascetic life of prayer and fasting in the desert soon became the most attractive, most popular avenue. Attractive to a particular type of person, I guess I should say. And an ascetic life of prayer was known as Gnostic martyrdom, according to St. Clement of Alexandria, using Gnostic in a positive sense. St. Clement and Origen were trying to reclaim the term Gnostic and use the term Gnostic in a orthodox sense, although over time it became associated with heresy. This Gnostic martyrdom also became known as white martyrdom because people were fasting so much that they seemed to become pale, white. And this was in contrast to the red martyrdom attained by those who died for Christ by shedding blood. Athanasius of Alexandria wrote a hagiographical account of St. Anthony of Egypt. This is a portrayal of the torment of St. Anthony in the desert by Michelangelo. He wrote this hagiographical account of Anthony of Egypt, which, like other hagiographies, ancient biographies of saints, portrayed Anthony as this superhero saint who performed miracles and battled demons in the desert. This book inspired this book right here. This is a collection of Athanasius' writing, including Life of Anthony. This book inspired thousands, tens of thousands, to try emulating Anthony, who was heralded as the father and founder of this white martyrdom. Anthony exhibited profound wisdom, but he was not considered a scholar or a systematic theologian or an intellectual like his hagiographer, Athanasius of Alexandria, like St. Clement, or like the theologian Origen of Alexandria. And there generally tends to be a suspicion around scholarship and book knowledge and books in general among the well-known followers of St. Anthony, who became known as the Desert Fathers and Mothers. For instance, Abba Evagrius said that there was a brother called Serapion who didn't own anything except the gospel, and this he sold to feed the poor. And he said these words, which are worth remembering: I have even sold the very word which commanded me, sell everything and give to the poor. The Desert Fathers and Mothers did not accumulate books for personal or even communal libraries because they generally refused to accumulate much of anything. These desert ascetics would spend all day praying the Psalms and weaving baskets, which they sold in exchange for food or some of the most basic living needs. People often traveled long distances to hear their words of wisdom, which were sometimes humorous. Sometimes the stories are quite hilarious, sometimes enigmatic, sometimes disturbing, especially to our modern ears, sometimes simple common sense, and often potentially life-changing. The Life of Anthony by Athanasius is a spiritual classic that anyone interested in diving deeper into desert spirituality ought to read. It's essential reading for anyone interested in deeper knowledge of the desert tradition. Also, the Apophthegmata Patrum, or the alphabetical collection. Apophthegmata Patrum is Latin for the sayings of the fathers. This is also essential reading, as it is a collection of the personal, pithy, and profound sayings and stories of the Desert Fathers and Mothers, including Abba Anthony, Abba Moses the Black, Abba Macarius the Great, Abba Poman, Paul the Barber, as well as Amma Sarah and Amma Syncletica. Abba is father, Amma is mother. Although there are only a few recorded sayings of the Desert Mothers, Sarah, Syncletica, and Theodora, we know that there was actually a huge number of women involved in this proto-monastic movement. And many women dressed as men to survive in the desert. So there could have been some desert fathers who were actually desert mothers. We don't know. For those interested in learning more about the presence or the paucity of women in the desert literature, I recommend this book, Desert Daughters, Desert Sons, Rethinking the Christian Desert Tradition by my colleague Rachel Wheeler. Many of the desert wisdom sayings resemble the stories and teachings of Zen Buddhists and Jewish Hasidic masters, a correlation that Henry Nouwen makes in his introduction to Desert Wisdom, sayings from the Desert Fathers. This is the paperback. There's also a hardcover. And in this book, Nouwen's student, Yushi Nomura, applies his skills in Japanese art to make these ancient sayings come alive in a fresh, new, and engaging way, and giving them a Zen Buddhist flavor. The invitation this week is to go outside into the desert wilderness with this book in hand, and to reflect on all the sayings in here. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go to Egypt or Syria or ancient Palestine or even a typical desert landscape, but go somewhere that feels like wilderness to you. Be wise and be safe, but perhaps not too safe. We do want to open ourselves up to the wilderness experience, and definitely make an effort to be outside, to go outdoors. There's a saying in the Apophthegmata Patrum, the sayings of the Desert Fathers, attributed to one of the Abbas named Abba Daniel. Not a very popular desert father, but he's got some sayings. Abba Daniel was asked by Abba Amos, "Father, when shall we settle down inside a cell to be with God?" Abba Daniel replied, God is in the cell, but on the other hand, God is also outside. So let's stay outside a little longer. Also, another saying that you will read. A philosopher asked St. Anthony, Father, how can you be enthusiastic when the comfort of books has been taken away from you? He replied, my book, O philosopher, is the nature of created things, and whenever I want to read the Word of God, it is usually right in front of me. So this week I invite you to read the book of nature while also reading this book. If you cannot read this whole book outside, spend at least a half hour outside with this book and with the book of nature. Then choose at least one, but no more than 3 sayings that speak personally to you from inside here. You may also want to comment on the images, but we want to focus specifically on the text. And then share on Moodle in no more than 5 sentences about why that saying or those sayings speak to you. I send you off now into the wilderness with these 2 quotes. First from Thomas Merton, who says, the real desert is this, to face the real limitations of one's own existence and knowledge and not to manipulate or disguise or embellish them. And Henry Nouwen, who in the introduction to the book says, the desert, the Egyptian desert of the Abbas and Ammas, but also our own spiritual desert, has a double quality. It is wilderness and paradise. It is wilderness because in the desert we struggle against the wild beasts that attack us. The demons of boredom, sadness, anger, and pride. They're literal wild beasts that devoured the martyrs, and then now there are spiritual wild beasts that show up in the desert. The demons of boredom, sadness, anger, and pride. However, it is also paradise, Nouwen says, because there we meet God and taste already his peace and joy. Blessings be with you as you pray in the wilderness.